Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to today's hearing, Secretary Yellen. I appreciate your appearing before the committee in this timely manner following the release of the President's budget. While the budget is the focus of today's hearing, I expect that the emergency measures that have been taken this weekend by Treasury, the Federal Reserve, and the FDIC will also be appropriately discussed today. It's important to learn more about what initiated the run on Silicon Valley Bank, the impact of the Federal Reserve holding interest rates low for too long, and what steps were or were not taken by the SVB and the banking regulators. In the meantime, I'm concerned about the precedent of guaranteeing all deposits and the market expectation moving forward. Once started, moral hazard, like inflation, is not easily contained and does long-lasting damage. Inflation played a key role in the recent bank failures as rising interest rates and mismanaged interest rate risk led to a liquidity crisis. Indeed, there is no issue more critical than the unacceptably high inflation that American families continue to face every day. Americans have now experienced 16 months of inflation at or above 6%. Costs of rent, groceries, and services continue to rise. Wages cannot keep up. Last year, the administration committed to working in a bipartisan fashion to address this serious problem, noting that the budget must complement monetary policy. Instead, what we've seen is a reckless tax and spend agenda that was forced through Congress, rolling out trillions of dollars in debt finance spending and hundreds of billions of dollars in new tax increases on U.S. job creators. The Congressional Budget Office says the Inflation Reduction Act will not only increase inflation in the near term, but Treasury will collect less corporate tax revenue with the partisan IRA in effect, despite being sold as a bill to make corporations pay their fair share. The Federal Reserve is having to compensate for this by growing interest rate hikes. Rising interest rates are impacting household budgets, the federal government's coffers, and as we saw this week, our banking system. The President's budget demonstrates the administration has not learned from its mistakes. After 2 years of policies that contributed to record high inflation and excessive deficit spending, this administration is doubling down with this budget with more of the same. The spending binge must stop. We must address our growing deficits in order to put the United States finances on a sustainable path, and pro-growth tax policy should be a part of that solution. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act led to one of the strongest economies in generations. The TCJA introduced competitive tax rates while broadening the base, including by enacting the first global minimum tax of its kind and putting an end to corporate inversions. It also contributed to record high corporate tax receipts, both nominally and as a share of gross domestic product. But instead of considering bipartisan pro-growth policies, the President's budget includes a whopping $4.7 trillion of new and increased taxes on American job creators, which ultimately means fewer jobs and lower wages. It also includes higher taxes on American energy producers. Earlier today, Senator Barrasso and a number of his Republican colleagues, including myself, sent a letter to you, Secretary Yellen, raising concerns with the over $100 billion in increased energy taxes proposed in the President's fiscal year 2024 budget. And, Mr. Chairman, I ask that this letter be included in.
Without objection, so ordered.
The administration's short-sighted partisan agenda extends to its unilateral approach to the OECD International Tax Agreement. For the last 2 years, Treasury has used the OECD negotiations to attempt to compel changes in U.S. law without regard for U.S. revenue, for U.S. companies and U.S. workers. Not only has the administration failed to put a stop to digital services taxes, but now foreign countries threaten to impose extraterritorial taxes on U.S. companies under the global minimum tax at Treasury's invitation. The latest OEC guidance confirms the administration has agreed to allow foreign countries to collect U.S. GILTI revenue and, worse, tax U.S. companies on their U.S. profits in violation of our existing tax treaties. The budget fails to consider these revenue impacts, which, if implemented, will result in billions of dollars of lost U.S. revenue. Meanwhile, the administration continues to hide its true intentions for transforming the IRS. The budget doubles down on the $80 billion already given to the IRS, including 2 more additional years of plus-up funding, totaling $29.1 billion solely for enforcement and compliance initiatives, in addition to $14.1 billion more of yearly funding. That's another $43 billion. Secretary Yellen, I agree with you that having a funding plan for an agency budget that dwarfs many others is critical. In the meantime, the IRS has embarked on a spend first, plan later approach that is not transparent or responsible and is a surefire recipe for error, waste, and mismanagement. While we may not have the details yet, we do know that only 6% of this existing plus-up for funding is for modernization, while over 62% is solely for hiring, more than 93% of that enforcement hiring. These new funds are not going to replace retiring U.S. agents, as annual appropriations already provide that funding. And the administration has not requested any reductions in IRS annual funding to account for replacing retirees with this plussed-up funding. Secretary Yellen, there are opportunities for the administration to work across the aisle on common-sense economic policies, but nothing suggests the President is abandoning the partisan tax and spend policies of the last 2 years. This administration must recommit to working with Republicans to develop real solutions that will stabilize the economy and create higher wages and opportunities for American workers. Thank you very much.